What I was never willing to do is not being me.
Exactly.
I was never, I mean, I am an emotional person. I care a lot. I am intense. So those aren't the things I would change, but I understood the perception of others.
So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. So I would love it if you would just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. I'm Jennifer Bell, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Let Us Entertain You.
So I would love you to share your really amazing story, because I have been reading up on you and listening, and there's some good lessons.
Yeah, my
in
story.
there.
I think I can't tell my story. I have to start kind of far back.
I love far back.
So when I was 13, my dad had a malignant melanoma. And he was fighting cancer for a while, and he had a surgery. And I remember going to the hospital, and the nurses just really taking care of me. And I said at 13 years old, I want to be a nurse. I want to take care of people. That's what I want to do. So fast forward, I went to school for nursing, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I kind of always felt something was missing. At age 14, I started my first job in a restaurant. And
That's young.
Yes, really young. I had brothers and sisters that had worked at the restaurant, and they needed an orange juice girl at Walker Brothers, which was a breakfast place. And
The
so
best breakfast place
I
ever.
became the orange juice girl. And so I just fell in love with the restaurant industry, even at that age. Those were my people. They rolled up their sleeves. They got down and dirty. They hustled. Yeah. You had to work together. It was just magical for me. So as I was in school and I was changing my major from nursing, I also realized that marketing came very easy for me. So I quickly changed my major to mass communications. I had an emphasis in advertising, and that's off I went. And then when I found myself back in Chicago after college, I actually worked for Maggiano's in Schaumburg and opened Maggiano's in Schaumburg. And I got an opportunity to see Rich Melman for the first time, who owns Let Us Entertain You. And he walked in the room, and everybody was like watching him and looking at him and seeing what he was doing. And he then proceeded to sit in like maybe 24 different seats in the restaurant. And this was before we opened. And he was making notes, and he was moving things and talking to people. And I found out later that he was looking at every perspective that the guest had in the restaurant and wanted to make sure that every seat felt good and had that energy. And
That is brilliant. I feel like that's such a lesson in any business, to experience what your customers are experiencing.
And that level of detail, like he just went
the
in.
time.
Yes, and it so resonated with me. And I really loved his passion. So a couple of years later, I'd only worked at Maggiano's for 7 months, and then I got another job. And I found a opportunity at the corporate office for Let Us Entertain You. And it was an advertising coordinator opportunity, and I applied for it. And I ended up not getting it. And then they called me back saying, we liked you. Our VP of marketing needs an assistant. Now, I went after this job with everything I had. I called almost every day. They knew how hungry I was to work for the company. And so what a great opportunity for me to combine my experience in a restaurant with marketing. Yeah. It really was my dream job.
And I think that's so interesting, too, we've had a couple of employees that when they were interviewing, you knew they wanted to be at Edlong. Like,
yes,
that's good advice too. Of telling
feel your passion.
Absolutely.
I want someone who wants to work for me.
I bet you look for that.
Yes,
now.
yes,
that's beautiful.
And it's hard to find.
It is.
So I think it's a really good tip for anybody. If that's a job you really want, make sure that person knows it.
Yes.
Be honest about it. I would call and say, hey, it's Jennifer. I just want to let you know how excited I am. You don't have to call me back, but I want you to know how much I want this job. And I was 22 years old, and I just went after it. And then, I started at Lettuce. And then I quickly, 6 months after I started, I became the PR coordinator. Then I went into PR management, PR director. And then I really loved technology. Technology was always something that I loved. I would take apart things and put them back together. And I realized that we were behind. The restaurant industry was behind. And I started with websites. And I was part of the first website that was done at Lettuce. And I realized we could do it better, more affordable. And so we kind of put together this rinky-dink business plan of bringing developers in-house. And I presented it to Rich Melman, our founder, and our CEO at the time, Kevin Brown. And they were smiling because it was awful, but they knew the idea was good. And so they're like, okay, Jen, let's do this. And so we brought a web team in. And now, I've been there and I've worked my way up. I'm the CMO. I'm so proud of what I do. Yeah. And I'm proud of the hard work. And I kind of sat in everyone's position too. So I have an extreme amount of empathy with what they go through on a daily basis.
And did that happen just organically that you got to sit in all those different seats?
It did. I always wanted something different, something more. I never said no, even to opportunities that I didn't like. I knew I was going to learn something. So I really just wanted to grow and develop. And so I said yes to everything.
So what were some that you didn't like?
I wasn't huge on customer service or certain things that I thought were just kind of tough. But I found out later, I love customer service now. So when I get to talk to our customers, I love it now. But back then it was like, no, I want to do PR or I want to do advertising. And I think sometimes when you're younger, you don't realize that really great opportunity might be out there if you just give things a chance and if you're open to learning and growing and developing.
I want to hear the story of you becoming partner.
Oh, okay. It's a very interesting story for me because that was a goal for me. And I had actually several mentors. I've mentioned Rich Melman, the founder of our company.
Is he still there?
He's still very much active. And Rich was extraordinary for me.
Yeah.
And he, he was an athlete. I was an athlete. He saw me hustle. He knew that I was tough and that he saw the drive in me. And so he really cultivated that and he motivated me. And then I had Kevin Brown, who was our CEO, who believed in me. And I think that really was resonated with me in the point where I need to believe in my people and I need to help them grow. So he really taught me that. But there were two people in marketing. So Sue Salzman was my direct supervisor, and she was a super powerhouse female, and it was just so great to have a female leader. But the most important and the most sort of influential person to me was Bob Wattel. So Bob Wattel founded the loyalty program and founded marketing at Lettuce. He was a buddy of Rich's, and he was a very complex, interesting man. And I remember I was 25 years old, and I asked Bob, if you could help me with something. And he got very angry at me, and he started yelling at me and screaming at me. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've never been talked to like this. So it went on and on and on. I sat there, and then he finished, and I said, no one in my life has ever talked to me that way. And he took a deep breath. He turned his back to me, and he kept taking deep breaths. And I was like, okay, I'm done here.
Yeah.
I'm no longer employed. He turned around and he said, Jennifer, thank you. And I'm so sorry. I promise you I will not talk to you that way. And then after that moment, he and I were so tight.
Wow.
We had this relationship where he knew he could trust me, and I knew I could say anything to him.
So what was he yelling at you about? Do you even remember?
I don't remember. It was something so small, which is why I was like, this is such an intense reaction. But
So
now,
something else was maybe
now that
going
I'm
on?
walking in the shoes of an executive, I know the stresses. I can't even imagine the stress he was put under.
Right.
Things I didn't realize then that I do know now sitting in the seat, right?
That's really interesting. So something else was going on in his
Yeah.
executive head, and you just ended up getting the brunt of it.
Yeah, so back to partnership. So he really advocated for me in so many different ways. And I remember it was Rich, it was Kevin, it was Fred Yost, and Bob. And they called me into their office, and I thought, oh my God, either I'm getting fired or something really nice is happening. And
It could go either way.
They said to me, they're like, Jen, we want to make you partner. And that's when I really took over everything in the marketing team. So there were 2 people before, now there was just me, and we were growing the team. And I just had so much vigor, and I had so many ideas, and it was so great. But back to Bob, because this is the best story, and I want to share this with you. So Bob, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and it was towards the end of his career, and Parkinson's was getting bad, so he decided to move to Arizona permanently. But he did not want to let go. And so I said to Bob, I'm like, you're going to be there. So we'll talk every week, and we'll set up a time. And it was Friday mornings, and we talked every week. And I didn't realize then how much I needed Bob, right? So like sometimes they say it's lonely at the top.
No,
so
this couldn't be truer.
I would wait for those conversations on Friday morning, and he's like, Jennifer, you're doing a good job. And he had just built so much in this department. I had so much empathy for him. I could tell that he just didn't want it to end, right? The Parkinson's got worse and worse, and his wife would call me saying, he's just going to listen. So I would talk, and he would listen. And then we'd hang up the phone, and I'd cry. But he was my mentor. He was my friend. And when he passed away, right before he passed away, sorry, I'm getting emotional.
No, my God, so am I.
Right before he passed away, I got to tell him, I said, Bob, I am going to take what you started, and I'm going to continue so this could go for another 50 years. I got you. And I heard him say thank you. And I got to tell my mentor.
That's his legacy. You
that
kept
was
his legacy alive.
Legacy. And I knew that. And we needed each other at that moment, and I knew that. So he was my mentor, and what a great moment in my life to be there for him. And then he didn't even realize how much he was there for me at that time in my life.
And I know you've carried the mentorship on too, because that's how you and I met.
Yes.
Is through Courtney.
Yes.
And she said, you've got to meet Jennifer. She's my mentor. So I bet he is like smiling down on you that you are continuing that.
I can feel that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the 1111 too. Exactly. It could be him too. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes we don't know the impact or the lives we touch.
Yeah, and I think, we have to have empathy, right, for people. Like, I knew he was having trouble letting go, and I could only imagine what that must have been like.
I can't imagine. And we're both
right?
going to have to do it sometime too.
Exactly, and how hard that's going to be.
Yes, yes. And I think having you as the link for him probably made it a ton easier too.
Well, it was my pleasure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does partnership happen though? Like I think I read that it's a nomination kind of
process.
process.
So I was unusual.
So when they told you,
I was unusual.
Did they say, okay, but you got to do these 5 things before?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people what it is you get nominated, and then you meet with everybody in the executive committee, and then we have a vote.
Okay.
And which is kind of nerve-wracking, right?
It sounds like rushing a sorority or something.
Yeah, it is. But I think what's great is sometimes people are nominated and I don't have that close of a relationship, or I have not worked with them. So when they come to me, it's just an opportunity for me to get to know them. And usually when someone makes it to that level, there's some pretty great star qualities in them. And it's just fun to see sort of the emerging leaders come up and the different types of personalities. And again, these are my people. These are restaurant people.
Yes.
So I really love it. And I love being part of that.
How many partners are there now? Is there many?
Yeah, like between 60, 70, I think.
Okay.
There's a lot.
I was really surprised to learn how many restaurants you guys have. Like, I definitely know RJ Grunts have family memories of going to Lincoln Park Zoo, and it was always RJ.
That was our number one. That's the OG,
That's so, I want to go. I haven't been there in a long time. And I remember we'd wait in line and you just wait.
Yeah.
But one of my favorites I did not know was Let Us Entertain You is the one across from the Gwen Joe's Steak and Crab.
Yes.
It's one of my all-time favorite
It's
Chicago
the best.
restaurants.
Best food, best service.
Best martini.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. I don't really like
Joe's
martinis.
Seafood, prime steak, and stone crab.
There
It
you
is.
go.
So it is, that brand in particular was created. Joe Stone Crab in Miami is the original family-owned restaurant.
I've been to that one.
Yes.
It's hard to get into that one, too.
And Rich and one of his partners, Gerard Sentioli, decided to take sort of iconic brands and help them grow. And Joe's was one of the first that we did, and super successful.
So what's your favorite?
Oh, I knew
Can
you
you
were
even
ask me
can
this.
you even
It's like
answer
picking
that?
a favorite child.
Exactly. Are you allowed to even
I will
say that?
tell you that where my husband and I celebrate the most is at the Oyster Bar at Shaw's Crab House.
Nice.
So I love oysters. I love to go out for things we can't make at home or, not easily do. And the Oyster Bar is such a friendly atmosphere. One of the bartenders we know pretty well. And when we closed on our house, we went there. And all the kind of moments of celebration when we want to just grab something. So I really like Shaw's. I like Abba, which is a Mediterranean concept. I love that. And then, of course, who doesn't like the RPMs, RPM seafood, RPM steak, RPM Italian. RPM seafood, I think, is very special on the river, as well as Pizzeria Portofino. It just unbelievable views. And
I want to touch on what we talked before we started recording, but playing sports. I really like that. So talk a little bit about, in high school, what you did and what you translate into business.
Sure. Well, I grew up with 3 brothers. I was the baby of the family, and I think they wanted a boy. So they were like, we're just going to treat her like she is one. And they did from the time I was little. They were throwing pillows at my feet, and they were tackling me and wrestling with me. And I really just loved the attention that I got from them. And I knew that sports was everything to those 3 guys. And so they taught me how to play sports, and they loved teaching me. So kind of first started with softball, and then went into basketball, and then I eventually started playing volleyball, and I played in high school, all 3 sports. And what I learned is that I was always the cheerleader. Like if I wasn't the best on the team, I was the loudest, and I was the one that motivated people, right? Like I was just into it. And I loved the camaraderie and the trust, right? The trust that you had to have.
That was your angel card
yes,
today.
our angel card. So the trust that you had to have in your teammates, right?
Yes.
Like you can't overcompensate for them. You got to give them the ball sometimes. You got to, and
let them fail.
Right. And great teams are built on so much trust. And I think that translates into the business world.
Totally
I'm
agree.
constantly trying to motivate the team, trying to challenge them. I push them to be better, the best versions of themselves. At the end of the year, when we review the year, I want them to be proud. And I want them to say, that was hard, but I learned a lot. And I'm competitive. So there's no, the only thing that I shoot for is to be the best we can be, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to be the best restaurant marketing team. And I tell them that. I give praise when necessary, but I also push them when needed. Mm-hmm. And I really love working with our team. And one of the biggest things that I did, and this came from sports, is that I told you Sue and Bob kind of ran marketing, and Bob ran loyalty and advertising, and Sue ran public relations and gift cards. And so when they left and I was left with it, I had the whole team. Mm-hmm. And I took down some of the silos, like we are one team. A good idea can come from anybody on this team. And I wanted them to start feeling like they could trust each other and lean on each other. And now we're building small little teams within our team, like a little content team or a product team within the marketing department. And it might not be something that you do day to day, but that you sit on and you learn and you experience. And some of the best ideas we've gotten have not come from the people from those teams. It's the people across the way that have a great idea.
That's cool. I do think that's like the most important thing, is the unity of the team is where the power comes from. And you do definitely get that from sports. And I think the coaches of the teams, that we've played on it, they're the leadership, and how important a good coach can make or break, or a bad coach can divide. Like I think that is the most dangerous, is the divisive. When that sets in, it's toxic.
Yeah, it really can be, right?
And it sounds like you really were focused on uniting, and the opposite of that.
Because that's what I want, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I read that every year you like to pick something to work on.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
So, and this came from Kevin Brown when he was sort of my direct report. He's like, what are you going to learn this year? And I loved that question.
It's a great concept.
And so it would be whether it was HTML because I wanted to help the web team, or digital marketing in areas that I didn't feel confident in, or, leadership skills, whatever it is, I feel like I have to put in a little bit extra effort to learn and to stay relevant and on top of my game.
Would you literally take classes then? So
Yes.
you'd pick one thing and say,
Kellogg
okay.
Executive Education is my friend, and I've taken 3 or 4 classes there. Plus,
That's good to know. And,
Yeah.
and what is the time commitment for a Kellogg?
it depends on the class. I've taken 8 to 12 week classes. I've taken, 3-4 day classes. So it just depends on the class. And that's what I loved about it, is you could go as far as you wanted to.
Yeah.
Which is great. But then there's also LinkedIn Learning, and there's also so many great things online if you just take the time and dedication.
And commit to it.
Yes.
I think that's
Yes.
good advice. That You have to
Yes.
commit to one thing you're going to learn this year.
I say that a lot to the team. Like, they're like, I don't know this. I'm like, well, learn it. Let's find a way for you to learn that. Like, what can we do?
My chief commercial officer was showing me, which I would love to do, but it's the time thing, but an immersion in Spanish.
Yes.
So you can go to these beautiful places and you have a coach
Amazing.
for like 2 weeks, I think is like the bare minimum. And I don't know what you can really learn in 2 weeks, but
But I feel like that's how you learn it.
wouldn't that be fun?
Fun,
I would love
yes.
to do it for like a month. And we have so many of our employees that speak Spanish. It would be, I took 5 years of it. You think I could speak it, but no.
I took 8, and I'm in the restaurant industry, and I still can't speak it.
So
as
let's
well.
take an immersion and go to some
Yes,
cool place.
you're on.
They would
Let's
be
do that. It'd be
I'd
awesome.
be so happy. Tell us about kind of the growth trajectory, like how that felt, because it feels like you were part of led us through some crazy growth.
Yeah,
and I know you
which
had
is
to-
hard.
I bet.
I think people question your skills as you rise because, I didn't have any experience running a loyalty program when I took over loyalty, which is why I needed Bob, right?
Right.
But I believe I always bet on myself. Like I know that I am going to try. I will fail, but I am going to do the best I can. And I know that I'm going to put in the effort needed.
And you said something that I thought was really profound about stop like questioning yourself. If you have the job, you got the job. Like,
Yes.
And I was like, that is good advice.
Yes. So I always feel like leaders have that imposter syndrome.
Yes,
There's a
yes.
reason when you get to achieve a certain position, especially if you've gotten promoted, you've earned that position. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to say, hey, I don't know exactly this about my new job. I don't know, I'm going to learn this. That's all fine. And you don't have to put on this armor or expectation that you know everything. And, we can work on it together. And that's the support that I want my team to feel is like, we might not know everything, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to learn it. We're going to get consultants or experts or whatever we need to grow and develop. And I feel like when you invest in others, they invest in you.
So back to that growth trajectory.
Yes.
Like you were
So-
huge into IT. I
Yeah.
think that
So
was-
so technology. So one of the big things was, me along with another colleague, we did our first email newsletter where we literally pasted 50 email addresses into an email and sent it out. And now we have 1.5 or 1.8 million email newsletter database, right? So like it started like that.
we had one computer at Edlong when I started.
Right.
Literally, it was crazy.
We faxed resumes, faxed press releases.
Oh, yeah.
We did all, and then
We had a typewriter.
exactly. So email marketing, nobody had email in the restaurant industry. So like it was so like the BlackBerry was revolutionary for us. And then that turned into the iPhone. So kind of following along that, when I took over loyalty, one of the things that we did was, along with a whole group of people, is we decided that You would enroll for the program with pen and paper. You'd fill out this brochure. You'd hand it to your server. And then 2 weeks later, you got a card in the mail. And we're like, yeah, we could do better than that. So we realized that the average age of somebody joining our loyalty program was 47. And at the time, we had just opened like youthful restaurants, Hub 51, Bub City, Sushi San, all of these youthful brands. So we were like, what's going on? So we realized that it was a paid program, and you got $10 it was $25. You got $10 on your first visit, $10 on your second, $10 on your third. So we gave you 30 back. But it was a barrier for young people to join the program. So we decided we needed a digital way for them to enroll, and we needed to make it free. So we decided to build an app. Well, I don't know if you have experience with apps, but they're very expensive. And at the time...
To build. They're expensive to build.
So this was 2014, 2015. And you had to do iOS, you had to do Android, and it was very expensive. And we hired a really fantastic agency to build the app for us. And we wanted to be a loyalty app, but we wanted to have reservations and gift cards and a concierge and all these things. We had such high hopes for it. And I will never forget the day, February 2nd, 2015, we launched this app. And if I were to know what I know today, then I wouldn't have had the guts to do it. But it was a huge leap of faith because of the investment in this.
Yes.
And we were literally checking the numbers of the app like by the hour. And we started to see people downloading it and enrolling. And by the end of the year, we had about 350,000 in the app. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Successful.
And our servers and everybody in the restaurants really promoted it. They believed in it. It was so great because it took a village to do that. And it was from the training, from the development, the design, the, user experience.
That's so true, because I can't remember which Lettuce Entertain You restaurant I was at, but the server said, download the app right now.
Yes.
Give me your phone. I'm like, here.
I often talk to the servers and say, like, I always ask them who has marketing experience. And none of them raise their hand. I'm like, you all have marketing experience.
Yes.
You guys have direct contact with our customers.
The most important contact with the customer.
Yes. You have information from our guests I don't have.
Yes.
And to me, it's all about the customer. I want to get inside their minds. I want to check their behavior, what we do well, what we don't do well. I want the feedback. But
have you ever read any books because I know you talk about, hospitality and making that experience so rich whichever restaurant they're at. Is there any books that you could tell like our listeners that you really loved that helped you?
Will Gadara's book, Unreasonable Hospitality, he hit the nail on the head. It's going above and beyond.
It's sitting in every seat at the Maggiano's before you open it.
Well, it's more than that. It's seeing customers and how they react and what they need and being able to change what you do to service them.
Yes.
And I think, again,
intuitive. My
ethos is taking the joy on a customer's face when you do something for them that makes them happy is what keeps me going.
And fulfilling.
It is so fulfilling. And that's really, it's not only fulfilling for me, but it's fulfilling for the entire team. Yeah. And I think that's the energy and the vibe why I love restaurants, is because they just operate so closely as a team.
I've only worked at a restaurant when I went to Purdue, and we had to, I was in food science, but we had to do a stint in the Purdue restaurant, which was where like dignitaries and stuff would come. So I learned, yes. It was like, you don't want to drop that on somebody. And they made us do all front of house, back of house.
Great.
What a difference between front and back.
And the empathy you need to have for the back of the house, and then the empathy you need to have for the front. Yes. I think it's so brilliant to expose people to both. So back to Walker Brothers. I came home from college one year and they had too many servers, so they didn't have a job for me. But they're like, you could work the meat grill, jokingly. And I'm like, I'll do it. The meat grill was the hardest job of my life.
The meat
grill.
The meat grill. Oh, so you're making bacon
sausage,
yeah.
And during breakfast, right? I mean, I still have scars.
I bet.
But it was like,
every time you eat bacon, you probably are like,
I know what it's like. I was so grateful for that opportunity just because it gave me so much insight to that
I love that. And the empathy for other roles is so important in any business, and I think of sports too. So my kids, I mentioned, all have played football throughout their lives, and my two right now are offensive linemen. My older one played for Ball State, so he had a scholarship, and he only played for a year there. But the effort to get a Division I scholarship, crazy. So they all started out kind of like pudgy big kids, and then kind of grew. So Garrett always was offensive lineman like in his younger years, and then grew and became a tight end.
Of course.
And he's like, I respect the line. I can't do my job with the offensive line. And we see it in the Chicago Bears all the time. So but it's such a thankless job. It never gets written up in the newspaper.
It doesn't.
Or, it's always the tight end that got the catch.
Well,
but
I think of Dick Buckus, who just passed away, and he was a pioneer for that line, And
it so translates to all of our businesses. It's like really respecting front of house, back of house, and what everyone has to do. And it's and I think someone said that about us at Edlong, like we look so calm. It's like a duck on water. Like our front of house looks so, and I feel like that in restaurants. Yes. But you go behind the curtain and everyone's going screaming, swearing,
lifting up the curtain sometimes. In any job, right?
That's so true. So Jennifer, tell me how you get feedback from your team, and also how you give feedback to your team. Like, what's your process?
Yeah, feedback. So from both our customers and my team is so important, right?
It's so important.
I can tell you that I had an executive coach when I first became a partner, and they did like a 360-degree view on me. And they interviewed a bunch of different people that worked with me. And you get the feedback from that. And I tell you, it's hard. It's really tough. And
what's some of the hardest feedback you've had to hear?
That I'm not a good listener, that I'm overly eager, that I am too emotional.
Oof. I hate that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just don't like that one.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being emotional.
Okay, I didn't like it, but there may be some truth into it, right?
Yes.
So even if I didn't like it, or even if it was hurtful, I was hurt, and I had a moment of where I lived in the hurt, but then I was like, okay, I'm gonna fire up, and here we go. And what are the things I can do to be a better listener? What are the things I can do to be more present? What are the things I can do to not look overly eager, but to still have enthusiasm? What I was never willing to do is not being me.
Exactly.
I was never, I am an emotional person. I care a lot. I am intense. So those aren't the things I would change, but I understood the perception of others. And then one of the things that it really opened my eyes to is that we behave differently. Your team talked a little bit about Enneagram, right? So knowing how others behave. And I had to do a lot of learning that not everybody thought like me.
Yeah. Yes.
And everybody was different. And
you talked about DISC. Do you do that with your team?
DISC, yeah. I'm an
that.
ID, yeah.
You're a what?
ID.
Okay, driver and
influence and dominant. So to me, they're opposite, right? Kind of.
No, I think they go really well together. Quite frankly.
But that's a lot of who I am.
Yes.
A little bit of the good, and it's the yin yang. But okay, so back to feedback too. One thing I learned is Kevin Brown used to say this to me. He's like, "You're so open." I just wanted to be better. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when I give people feedback and they're a little bit resistant to it, it's just they're not ready to grow in that way, right? And I have to kind of get to why. And then the people who are open, you really help cultivate, because we cannot get to the next level without really looking in and growing and learning what we need to develop to get to that level.
Have you ever used the DISC or when you have conflict within your team or conflict
100%.
anywhere? I think that's
just did it the other day.
Oh, I love that.
So everybody does DISC, and we posted. I have a outside my door, and it's like 3 things about me you should know. I move fast, and it's what I am, and so I want my team to know, right?
Yes.
And so I was having trouble communicating with someone.
So you have your DISC on
my door.
Awesome. I love that. We have our strength finders on our doors, but yeah.
So feedback for me is a big part, and being open to it is a big part. I just don't think you can grow unless you're open to feedback.
Totally. So you used it the other day. So tell
Yes.
a little bit about how you did that.
I had an employee that I was having just a hard time connecting with. So you could go on the website, and she was like an SC, which is completely polar opposite of me.
Which is usually slower. Like one time I've seen it where it shows like your speed.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and then
and I'm
the other
super fast.
I'm a 9 quick start on this other thing we do. Yeah. And that's where they told us though that conflict can happen is when your your speeds are just
and
different.
that was a lot of this. And so then I pulled a report, and it said, okay, this person, these are the things that are important to them. When you are trying to connect with them, this is what you do. When you have a conflict, this is what you do. And I was like, I wish everyone in America had this, because it was such good tool. And then I went and I literally planned out my approach with her, and it was a great interaction. I think we just don't see eye to eye in a lot of things, but I could respect and I could understand what was important to her.
Yes.
And focusing on that, and not what's important to me, but what's important to her.
And
that
you
was
need
important.
all types. Like I feel that too, where I get very frustrated when things don't happen as quickly as I would like.
Same.
But I know that I need the people on my team that are going to look at the detail, look at the data, and slow it down for a second.
Yeah, you pair yourself with someone that has strengths and your weaknesses, right?
Exactly.
So it's important.
How do you model in your team what you want to see in them?
I think during the pandemic, we lost our business, right? And it was literally the next day went down to zero. I had to furlough the team, about half the team. We had to furlough a lot of our employees. It was a really dark time for us. And the team members that were there were working twice as much, twice as hard. And marketing didn't stop, right? So we had, in fact,
you had to get creative.
We had to get creative, but we had more eyes on our marketing than we ever had before, because people were home.
Yes.
So they were opening, like our email open rate sometimes was at 70%.
Wow.
When it was averaging 40, because people were home. And they needed stuff
and they
social
wanted,
media was being engaged with. So we just had so where some of the people slowed down, we ramped up with half the team. So as we're going through 2020, then we're going through 2021, and we're not slowing down. And then everyone comes back to the restaurants in full force because they miss dining out. And guess what? We were busy. So at some point, I was working 16-hour days, and I remember my husband pushing down my laptop every day. And it was really, I felt this need to save my people, to protect them, to save the organization. But what I was doing was burning myself out. And then my team was watching me work, so they were working equally as hard. Mm-hmm. And then I had this aha moment where they haven't taken a day off because I haven't taken a day off. They haven't, left early because I haven't left early. Yes. And so I purposely was like, I'm going on vacation. And then I went, and then boom, 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 they all did. Or, tonight I want you to stop at 5 and I want you to do this. Like I had to, my ethos is caring, so I had to care for them. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I got caught up too much in what was happening with the pandemic, that I didn't realize that I was setting a bad example. And I needed to change that
That's
behavior.
really wise. That's very wise. I think, they have to see it. That we have this, female strong. Mm-hmm. And we always say that the girls, if they can't see it, they can't be it. And it's reminding me of that.
Yes.
We have to model what we want our employees to do. Mental health is hugely important.
Mental health, physical health.
Yes. Yeah. And, time with your kids and your family. So we ended up, the COVID was horrible. It was just hard. And we were essential. So we were totally pivoting, and keeping the people safe was like the number one thing. But there was one point that we shut down. Like we could just tell everybody everyone was burnt out. It was like the July 4th week of that, really, and we're like, we're just shutting it down.
Good.
It was awesome.
It
was the time when
right?
you could, you don't have to look at your phone. No one's there.
You needed a break.
Yes. And the sky didn't fall.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've had really hard 4 years. So in 2018, I lost my mom. In 2020, we lost the business. And in 2022, I lost my dad.
Oh,
so
it's a lot.
It is a lot. And what why I want to talk about it is because those were probably the three most important pillars of my life, right?
Yes.
My career and my parents. My mother was my cheerleader. She was the one that every day kept me going and knew what to say to me. My father was my sounding board. You know, when I needed advice, he was always very hard on me, but very motivating. And I knew like I could trust him. So going through that and going through COVID and losing them, it was devastating.
That's huge.
And
it's the phone calls. I know what you mean.
Yes.
Like, I just missed the
2
phone
minutes.
calls.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I had to find replacements for my cheerleader, and I had to find a replacement for my sounding board. I always think of my parents, and I was so fortunate to have the parents I did. One of 6 kids, so loving, so caring. They were amazing people, both of them, and they loved each other.
I was gonna ask you that because whenever I hear stories, I mean that's pretty close.
Yeah.
To pass away.
They loved my dad was never the same after my mother passed
Almost
away.
like a blessing in a way that
Yes.
that they went together
Yes.
and not together same year, but very close.
No, very close. I think just something was missing in my dad when he lost my mom, and I miss them dearly. But I have really figured out what resilience means.
Yes.
Right? Like I always thought I was a resilient person, but when you go through things like that and you have no control over anything, and that's one thing as a leader. I like control over things, and you can't control that, right? I couldn't control my parents' health, and I couldn't control COVID. And those were 2 things. It was hard. It was something
So
hard to
hard.
deal with. But
How did you find these? So who did you find as your cheerleader and sounding board?
Interesting areas. So my cheerleader is a couple different. They're friends. You know, they're really close friends that when I talk to, they can hear it in me. They can recognize in me that, you know, something's wrong, and they're the ones that are going to give me the best advice. And then my sounding boards are, you know, Kevin Brown, even RJ Melman, who is now the president of Lettuce. It's Rich's son. He's become a really great leader and partner. And it's just nice to have him as a sounding board. And then one great thing that came out of COVID is all the executives have a stand-up call like in the morning, and now we've leaned on each other too. So we know that we're in this position where we talk more. I know what they're dealing with. They know what's going on in marketing. The communication is better. So it was a really great opportunity to increase, you know, communication and overall relationships. So those are my sounding boards, right?
good.
So it's nice.
Yeah, I think having that, I feel the same. Like with my executive leadership team, definitely we got closer during COVID, and
You had to, right? You were in it
yes.
together.
And I have to lean on them. I mean, they are absolutely my circle of trust. We like to
Right,
say, but
right.
yeah. Do you have any advisory boards that you like? I also am part of this mentoring group. I've been a part of it for, 25 years at least, I think. But it's run by the 2 sage, you know, people that are retired and have been there, done that. It's a couple. But that's another great place to just
so
go.
actually Culinary Care, being on the board of Culinary Care with Courtney
yeah.
was a great opportunity. I always just thought Courtney was so inspiring, and she started Culinary Care by the loss of her father.
Yes.
And we connected on the fact that food brings joy. And
Did you use Culinary Care with
we
your
do,
with your-
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
No, not with my parents, because my parents were elderly, so they were and they didn't have cancer. But
I know.
our
Lettuce
restaurants-
Entertain you as
yeah.
part of Culinary.
Yeah.
Yes, I figured.
So our
that's-
restaurants use it, and I've delivered meals. So what Culinary Care
cool.
does is deliver restaurant quality meals to cancer patients going through chemotherapy. And what you don't realize is that's a very scary, lonely time in a cancer patient's life. And so connecting with the food, the looks on these people's faces when we walk in with these bags and they have this delicious meal. And, you know, a lot of times people can't work, so they lose insurance. And there's all kinds of just devastating stories that Courtney's been able to bring so much joy to these patients. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for me, taking some of the pain I felt with the loss of my parents and channeling that into something really positive.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast. I learned a lot, and she was fantastic.
She's great.
And I learned that like she said that when they're getting chemo, like that day is when they have an appetite. Like it's important
that they eat
to get
because they're not
nutrition.
going to eat after.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's almost
and
like,
when something smells good or is your favorite, there's.
I love that Lettuce does that. That's awesome that you guys partner with them.
It's really important.
Any other philanthropy that you're really passionate about? Or
Nothing that I'm on the board on, but I think the fact that I was always connected with cancer a little bit. My dad had cancer, as I said, when we were young, but he lived, right? And he had prostate cancer and then leukemia at the end of his life. So cancer charities, a lot of breast cancer. My dear neighbor at 35 was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I know Lettuce, it's October and it's Breast Cancer Month. And we just did this Pink on the River event and it was special. And so those are the things that I feel connected to the most.
Any advice that you would have for our listeners that are emerging leaders that you think is, you wish someone maybe had told you when you were at that point in your career?
Yeah, a couple things. First, say yes.
Say yes.
Just
say yes. Exactly.
Say yes. Do things that are totally uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone. Do things that you think you can't do. Put yourself out there, keep learning, and know that it is lonely. And find somebody to talk to, find a mentor, find someone else to confide in. Sometimes as you're growing as a leader, you feel the need to prove yourself. And this is where you've earned that job. You no longer need to prove yourself. So take the time to really develop and grow yourself. And that's important.
And I love how you said your friends. Like you do need, not a ton. You need
you need those
2 to
people.
3 girlfriends or whatever that you can be yourself.
Yes.
Let your hair down and say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
They don't even know really what I do for a living.
Right.
They just know me as Jen. And I love that.
I think that's very good advice. Okay. So this one. So what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
This is such an interesting question. And I just go back to the key kind of ethos of who I am. And I just want people to know that I cared and that I cared about them and I cared about their growth, their success. I want to make sure that they have all the tools that they are to be successful. And, I just want them to say she was a really thoughtful, caring leader. And that's really what it comes down to for me.
I love that.
I went into nursing because I wanted to take care of people. I went into hospitality because I wanted to take care of people. And
luckily not as much blood and stuff in the
no,
hospitality.
It's easier
kind of
to take care of people.
Bonus.
Yes. And I think for me too is I've had a lot of sadness. I want to find more joy. And so
and what a great place, though. I mean, to be in hospitality, to find joy. See joy of people doing their anniversaries, or like you were saying.
Yeah, we all just need more joy. And so that's really going to be the next half of my life, is really focusing on more joy.
That's perfect. And I think back to your mentor, and you were carrying on his legacy, and I think now is probably the time that it's going to be truly the title of this podcast, but owning your own legacy. I love that. And joy is perfect. So
yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Laurette. This was fun.
Good. It was really fun. And you have so much wisdom.
Oh,
and I really appreciate you sharing it. And I think there's going to be people you don't even know that are going to get pieces from this and be
thank you.
Loved that.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was nice to be here today.